Welcome to BaseballGuys.com. I'm Ray Flowers, and thank you for joining me on another edition of Around the Horn. Today, I'm going to start off with the big news of Johnny Damon. Yeah, we've said this before, and yes, we've talked about him repeatedly here at BaseballGuys.com, but it appears we might actually be getting closer to a resolution of the Johnny Damon matter. At this point, he's apparently been offered a 2-year deal by the Tigers for $14 million. Now, I have no idea how he went from $2 to $4 million from all these deals to a potential $7 million deal with the Tigers. Guess you have to thank agent Scott Boras, the miracle worker of all miracle workers when it comes to agents. There's a late interest from the White Sox as well. So now we have the Tigers, the Braves, and the White Sox. It appears that the Braves are now in third place with the White Sox and the Tigers vying for his services. We'll have to wait and see how it comes out, but if Damon gets anything like the rumored 2-year, $14 million deal, he's going to have to be very surprised and very happy after seeing very little movement with his name the past month or so. Elijah Dukes is a player who did sign a contract. He's a fellow outfielder. The 26-year-old with the Nationals signed a 1-year deal for $444,000. Don't forget about him on draft day. He's got a lot of problems in his past, off-field and on-the-field issues. He's still, like I said, just 26 years old, should have a shot at full-time playing time in the outfield with the Nationals, possesses a lot of physical talents. He could theoretically be a 2020 performer if everything breaks right for him. Still very, very talented, still very raw. But don't forget about Elijah Dukes on draft day. He's one of those guys you could target late and see a bounty in return. Tim Lincecum, another player in the news for contract, though this time we're a little bit confused as to what's going on. Lincecum's about ready to go into the arbitration process. It will occur tomorrow on Friday. The Giants have come in with an offer of $8 million. Lincecum has submitted a figure of $13 million. Arbiters will hear the case and then decide one way or the other. There's no meeting in the middle or anything like that. It will either be the $8 or the $13 million totals. Most people in baseball think that Lincecum's pretty much a lock for the $13 million. He's basically been the best pitcher in the history of baseball when it comes to this process over the first 2.5 seasons of his career. 2 Cy Young Awards. Very little to argue against him getting $13 million when pitchers like Verlander and Felix Hernandez are just signed massive deals, greatly outpacing that in their dollar figures per season. The Giants supposedly offered a 3-year deal for $37 million. It's a bit odd. Number one, there's conflicting reports of whether or not it actually occurred, but secondarily, if Lincecum submits a $13 million figure and wins this year, which seems very likely, he'd have to fall completely on his face to not get more money than that in arbitration next year. So why would the Giants come and offer him a deal of an average salary of less than $13 million over those 3 seasons? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Looks like this deal's going to arbitration. I wouldn't be at all surprised to hear Lincecum with the new $13 million contract as we hit next week, because it just doesn't look like the Giants are willing to add enough dollar figures to that contract that they're offering him to make it a viable option for him. Steven Strasburg, an arm with the Nationals, another youngster drawing a lot of interest. He's probably the number 1 arm in baseball at this point. Fastball can touch 100 miles an hour. Got great secondary stuff. In fact, he's probably the best pitching prospect the game has seen in the past decade, maybe more. He had an injured knee that came up at the Arizona Fall League. He has reported that he's 100%. He's been training. Everything looks good. He's ready to go for spring training. Remains to be seen if the Nationals will really give him a shot at the starting rotation at the start of camp, if they'll send him down to the minors, give him maybe a half a season of work in the minors before bringing him up. But the bottom line is with Strasburg that he's healthy, he's ready to compete, and they don't have a better arm than him with the Nationals. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with him. Look for him to maybe be used like the Braves did last year with Hanson. Give him maybe 10 or so starts in the minor leagues and then bring him up if he has a lot of success against the farm hands down there in the minors. Look for Strasburg to make his mark at some point in 2010, and for 2011 to really be the point where he asserts himself as potentially one of the 20 best pitchers in the National League. Chad Qualls, the closer for the Diamondbacks, coming back off an injury. He had a kneecap that required some work. He says he's healthy as well. He had a very good undercover season last year. Didn't quite get to the 25 save total for the Diamondbacks. That will depress his fantasy value this season. Amongst all pitchers, though, last year that threw at least 50 innings, his 6.43 strike-to-walkout ratio was the best in baseball. Bottom line is he doesn't walk anyone. He keeps the base runners down. He's had a whip of 1.18 or lower in 3 of the last 4 seasons. Look for Qualls to be another option late in the draft that could bring you a big return. Doesn't have the name, doesn't necessarily have the save totals, but could be highly effective in a top 10 closer in baseball if everything breaks right and he truly is healthy in 2010. And then finally, one other closing situation to discuss. That's the Astros. A lot of movement there with the Astros. They lost Jose Valverde, they lost the Troy Hawkins, and they brought in two names. They brought in Matt Lindstrom in a trade and then signed Brandon Lyon to a 3-year deal for $15 million. That's a big money deal for a pitcher who's basically been a setup man most of his career. Lyon had a great season last year for the Tigers, set career highs all across the board. Unfortunately, a lot of that seems like a bit of a mirage. He doesn't strike many batters out. He walks too many batters. He has problems holding runners on base. There's a myriad of things, if you look at Lyon, that makes me believe that last season truly was that career effort. Now, you look at Lindstrom, he also has some issues. He throws 96, 97 miles an hour. Doesn't strike out as many guys you'd think he would throwing that hard, a little bit under 8 per 9 innings pitched, but he's had issues with the walks, often something we see with youngsters who throw hard. Both pitchers have some injury concerns. Last year it was an elbow issue with Lindstrom, though he did come back after the All-Star break last year. Did a much better job of locating his pitches, leading some to hope that he's kind of figured things out and will be able to be a positive factor at the end of the bullpen. Lyon had a cyst that was draining his shoulder. Not a big situation, but obviously it's in his shoulder. It's a concern. It's reportedly going to set him back about 10 days when it comes to spring training. So look for those two guys to battle for save opportunities all year in Houston. I think Lindstrom has the better stuff and probably the better chance of holding down that role. He was 15 for 17 converting saves last year with the Fish, but with all the money they've got invested in Lyon, don't look for this to be an easy scenario to dissect. Look for both of them to be guys only to target late in fantasy leagues. You don't want to reach early because it's a really muddled situation at this point in Houston. Again, I'm Ray Flowers. It's BaseballGuys.com. Thanks for joining me on Around the Horn, and I'll talk to you all again soon.